In suburban Connecticut, a 62-year-old successful businesswoman was about to discover that family loyalty could be weaponized against her. What started as offering to host her milestone birthday celebration turned into financial manipulation when they presented her with a bill for her own party. Victoria Anderson wasn't your typical pushover. She had built a marketing empire from nothing and commanded boardrooms full of executives. But when her own family began treating her like a cash machine, she had no idea she was walking into the ultimate betrayal. Victoria's generosity would lead to a devastating revelation about the people she trusted most. What began as birthday planning would become strategic warfare. The quiet streets of Westfield would never be the same after a businesswoman's calculated revenge. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed. Because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The email arrived on a Tuesday morning in March, buried between client proposals and vendor invoices in Victoria Anderson's overflowing inbox. She was reviewing quarterly projections for her boutique marketing firm when the subject line caught her attention: Mom's 65th birthday, family meeting this weekend. Victoria paused, her coffee growing cold as she processed the message from her daughter-in-law, Stephanie. 65. Had it really been that long since she'd built Anderson Creative Solutions from a spare bedroom operation into a thriving agency with 12 employees and clients across 3 states? The years had blurred together in a whirlwind of presentations, campaigns, and late nights that had defined her life since her husband Robert's sudden death from a heart attack 8 years earlier. She opened Stephanie's email, expecting the usual family coordination that came with planning any gathering for the sprawling Anderson clan. Instead, she found something that made her chest tighten with a mixture of surprise and unease. "Hi, Mom," the message began, using the title Stephanie had adopted after marrying Victoria's eldest son Brandon 15 years earlier. "The whole family has been talking, and we all agree that your 65th birthday deserves something really special. This isn't just any birthday. It's a milestone that marks everything you've accomplished and how much you mean to all of us." Victoria smiled despite herself. Stephanie could be dramatic, but her heart was usually in the right place. The email continued with increasing enthusiasm about venue options, catering possibilities, and guest lists that seemed to grow more elaborate with each paragraph. By the time Victoria reached the end, Stephanie was describing what sounded less like a family dinner and more like a corporate gala. "We're thinking the Westfield Country Club, maybe 150 guests, full dinner service, live music, the works. Brandon says you deserve nothing less than perfection, and honestly, after everything you've done for this family, we want to give you a celebration that matches your success." Victoria's initial warmth began to cool as she reread the details. The Westfield Country Club wasn't just expensive, it was prohibitively so. She'd attended charity events there and knew the venue fees alone could run into 5 figures before adding catering, entertainment, and all the extras Stephanie seemed to be planning. Her phone buzzed with a text from Brandon. "Did you see Steph's email? We're all so excited about this party, Mom. You only turned 65 once." Before Victoria could respond, her office phone rang. The caller ID showed her younger son Nathan's number. "Mom, did Stephanie send you that email about your birthday?" Nathan's voice carried the same excitement she'd heard from Brandon, but underneath it, Victoria detected something else, a forced quality that didn't quite ring true. "I just read it," Victoria said carefully. "It sounds extensive." "It's going to be amazing," Nathan continued, his words tumbling over each other. "Steph's been researching venues for weeks. She found this incredible package deal at the country club that includes everything: dinner, drinks, decorations, even a live band. It's exactly the kind of celebration you deserve." Victoria found herself frowning at the phrase, package deal. In her business experience, package deals at exclusive venues weren't typically associated with cost savings. "Nathan, sweetheart, this all sounds lovely, but have you considered the expense? The country club isn't exactly—" "Mom, don't worry about any of that," Nathan interrupted quickly. "We've got it all figured out. Just focus on enjoying your special day. You've earned it." The conversation ended with Nathan promising to call back later with more details, leaving Victoria staring at her phone with a growing sense of unease. Something about the family's sudden enthusiasm for an elaborate celebration felt orchestrated, almost rehearsed. She decided to call her youngest child Rebecca, who lived in Boston and had always been the most straightforward of her 3 children. If anyone would give her an honest assessment of this birthday situation, it would be Rebecca. "Hey Mom, what's up?" Rebecca's voice was warm but distracted, the sound of city traffic audible in the background. "Did you know about this birthday party Stephanie's planning?" There was a pause that lasted just a beat too long. "Oh yeah, she mentioned something about that. Sounds like it'll be nice." Victoria's marketing instincts, honed by years of reading between the lines with clients and competitors, immediately picked up on Rebecca's evasive tone. "Rebecca, honey, do you know how much this is going to cost?" Another pause. "Mom, I'm sure Stephanie and Brandon have it under control. They wouldn't plan something they couldn't handle." But Victoria heard something in her daughter's voice, a careful neutrality that suggested Rebecca knew more than she was saying. "Have you talked to them about the budget for this?" "Listen, Mom, I'm actually running into a meeting right now. Can we talk about this later? I'm sure everything will work out fine." After Rebecca hung up, Victoria sat in her office overlooking the tree-lined street where she'd built her business, feeling increasingly isolated from her own family's planning. In the corporate world, when people were evasive about budgets and costs, it usually meant one of 2 things. Either they were hiding how much they were spending, or they were hiding who was expected to pay for it. That evening, Victoria drove to Brandon and Stephanie's house in the affluent Westfield neighborhood where they'd lived since Brandon's promotion to regional sales manager at a pharmaceutical company. The house was impressive, a colonial revival with manicured landscaping that spoke to Stephanie's attention to detail and Brandon's steady income. But as Victoria pulled into the circular driveway, she noticed Stephanie's BMW had been replaced by a more modest Honda, and the elaborate flower beds that had been Stephanie's pride were looking somewhat neglected. Stephanie answered the door with her usual bright smile, but Victoria's trained eye caught the slight tension around her daughter-in-law's eyes, the way her greeting seemed just a touch too enthusiastic. "Victoria, perfect timing. Brandon's in his office finishing up some work calls, and the kids are at soccer practice. Come in, come in." I was just reviewing some of the party details. The house's interior maintained its elegant appearance, but Victoria noticed subtle changes. The expensive artwork that had adorned the entry hall was gone, replaced by family photos in simpler frames. The living room furniture remained beautiful, but the costly decorative accessories Stephanie had once displayed with pride were notably absent. "Coffee?" Stephanie offered, leading Victoria toward the kitchen. "That would be lovely." Victoria accepted the offer while observing Stephanie's movements. There was something almost manic about her energy, a brittle quality to her cheerfulness that set Victoria's instincts on high alert. As Stephanie busied herself with the coffee maker, a simpler model than the high-end espresso machine that had once occupied the same counter space, Victoria decided on a direct approach. "Stephanie, this birthday party sounds wonderful, but I have to ask, have you and Brandon really thought through the costs involved? The country club, the catering, entertainment for 150 people, it's going to be quite expensive." Stephanie's hands stilled for just a moment before she continued preparing the coffee. "Oh, Victoria, you don't need to worry about any of that. We want to do this for you. After everything you've done for our family over the years, it's the least we can do." Victoria felt a chill run down her spine. In her business, when people deflected specific questions about money while emphasizing emotional obligations, it usually meant they were setting up for a financial ask. "What do you mean, everything I've done for the family?" Stephanie turned, her smile bright but her eyes avoiding direct contact. "Well, you know, you've always been so generous. The down payment help when we bought this house, the kids' summer camp fees, Christmas gifts, college funds. You've been amazing." Each item Stephanie listed had been a gift freely given, expressions of Victoria's love for her family and her desire to share her business success with the people who mattered most to her. But the way Stephanie was cataloging them now, like entries in a ledger, made Victoria's stomach turn. "Those were gifts, Stephanie. I gave them because I wanted to, because I love my family." Of course, of course. Stephanie's voice took on a slightly higher pitch. And this party is our gift to you. A way to show our appreciation for everything you've meant to us. Brandon appeared in the kitchen doorway, his usually confident demeanor seeming forced. Mom! I thought I heard your voice. Did Steph show you the party planning materials? Victoria looked between her son and daughter-in-law, both of whom were smiling at her with an intensity that felt performative rather than genuine. Something was definitely wrong, and she was beginning to suspect that this elaborate birthday celebration wasn't the generous gesture they were presenting it to be. Brandon, can you and I talk privately for a moment? Brandon's smile flickered almost imperceptibly, but he nodded. Sure, Mom, let's go to my office. As Victoria followed her eldest son down the hallway, past family photos that chronicled years of holidays, graduations, and celebrations she had helped fund, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was walking into something that would change her relationship with her family forever. The question was whether she was walking into a misunderstanding that could be cleared up with honest conversation, or whether her own children had been planning something that would force her to see them in an entirely different light. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Brandon's home office felt smaller than Victoria remembered, cluttered with financial documents and pharmaceutical sales reports that seemed to multiply across every available surface. Her son gestured for her to take the leather chair across from his desk while he remained standing, his hands fidgeting with a pen in a way that reminded Victoria of his childhood nervous habits. Mom, before you say anything, I want you to know that this party idea came from a place of genuine love, Brandon began, his voice carrying the practiced tone he used with difficult clients. Stephanie and I have been talking about how we never properly celebrated your business achievements, and with your 65th birthday coming up. Victoria studied her son's face, noting the dark circles under his eyes and the way his usually pressed shirt showed wrinkles. Brandon, sit down. You're making me nervous pacing like that. He reluctantly took his seat, and Victoria could see him more clearly under the desk lamp's harsh light. Her successful, confident eldest son looked exhausted in a way that went beyond simple work stress. Tell me what's really going on, Victoria said gently. And please don't give me any more speeches about celebrating my achievements. Something's wrong, and I can see it written all over your face. Brandon's composure cracked slightly. Mom, everything's fine. The pharmaceutical industry is just competitive right now. My territory has been challenging, but nothing I can't handle. Victoria's business instincts kicked into high gear. Challenging how? Are your sales down? It's not just sales, Brandon admitted, then caught himself. I mean, it's complicated. The industry has changed a lot in the past few years. Doctors are prescribing differently, insurance companies are more restrictive, and my company has been restructuring territories. Each word confirmed Victoria's growing suspicions. She'd built her marketing agency by understanding when clients were in trouble, even when they tried to hide it behind corporate speak. Brandon, how long has your income been affected? Mom, this isn't about money. How long? Victoria's voice carried the authority that had made her successful in boardrooms full of people twice her son's size. Brandon slumped in his chair, the pretense finally collapsing. About 18 months. Maybe longer. My commission structure changed, then they reduced my territory, and now with the new regulations. He ran his hands through his hair. I've been trying to make it work, but our expenses haven't exactly decreased to match. Victoria looked around the office with new eyes, noticing things she'd missed before. The expensive computer monitor had been replaced with an older model. The collection of awards and certificates that had once lined the walls were fewer now, leaving rectangular shadows where frames had hung. Even the family photos looked different, more carefully curated, as if some had been removed. What about Stephanie's income? Victoria asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. She's been doing freelance graphic design work, but it's inconsistent. The kids' activities, the mortgage, private school tuition. Brandon's voice trailed off as he seemed to realize he was revealing more than he'd intended. Victoria felt a complex mixture of sympathy and growing alarm. Her son was struggling financially, which explained the subtle changes she'd noticed in their lifestyle. But it didn't explain the elaborate birthday party planning or the family's coordinated enthusiasm about an event they clearly couldn't afford. Brandon, if money is tight, why are you planning an expensive party? Wouldn't it make more sense to do something simpler? Her son's expression shifted, becoming almost pleading. Mom, that's exactly why we need to do this. This party isn't just about celebrating you. It's about showing everyone that our family is still successful, still connected. My clients, Stephanie's potential clients, the kids' friends' parents. We live in a community where appearances matter. Victoria felt a chill of understanding. You're saying this party is for business networking? Not just that, Brandon said quickly. We genuinely want to celebrate you. But yes, having a successful event with influential guests could help both Stephanie and me professionally. And you know everyone in the local business community. Your marketing agency has connections we could really use right now. The pieces were beginning to fall into place, and Victoria didn't like the picture they were forming. So this celebration is partly about using my business relationships to help your careers? When you put it like that, it sounds calculating, Brandon protested. But think about it, Mom. You've always said that business is about relationships. This party would strengthen all of our family's relationships while honoring you at the same time. It's a win-win situation. Victoria stood up and walked to the window overlooking Brandon and Stephanie's backyard, where she could see the elaborate swing set she'd bought for her grandchildren 2 years earlier. The yard was still beautiful, but the professional landscaping service had clearly been discontinued. The grass needed attention, and the flower beds showed signs of do-it-yourself maintenance. Brandon, I need you to be completely honest with me. How much is this party going to cost? There was a long silence before Brandon answered. The total package at the country club would be around $35,000. Victoria turned around sharply. $35,000? For one evening? That includes everything, Brandon said defensively. Venue rental, catering for 150 people, premium bar service, live entertainment, flowers, photography, even valet parking. Stephanie researched it thoroughly. It's actually a good value for what you get. And how exactly were you planning to pay for this good value? Brandon's expression became carefully neutral in a way that made Victoria's heart sink. Well, we were hoping. We thought that since this is your party and you've always been so generous with family celebrations. The words hung in the air like an accusation. Victoria felt her face flush with a combination of anger and betrayal. You want me to pay for my own birthday party? Not want, Brandon said quickly. We were hoping you might consider it an investment in the whole family's future. The networking opportunities, the business connections, the way it would position all of us in the community. Victoria sat back down, needing a moment to process what she was hearing. Her son and daughter-in-law had planned an elaborate celebration that they couldn't afford, invited guests primarily for business networking purposes, and expected her to fund the entire event under the guise of it being a gift to her. Let me understand this correctly, Victoria said, her voice deadly calm. You and Stephanie planned a $35,000 party, presented it to me as a generous family gift, but expect me to pay for it myself so that you can use the event to advance your struggling careers? Mom, please don't make it sound so mercenary, Brandon pleaded. We do want to celebrate you. You deserve recognition for everything you've accomplished. But yes, we were hoping this could help our family's financial situation too. Is that really so wrong? Victoria thought about all the family celebrations over the years, graduations, anniversaries, holidays, that she had funded because she wanted to bring her family together and share her success with the people she loved. But those had been her choice, her initiative, her genuine desire to give. This felt completely different. Who else knows about this arrangement? Victoria asked. Brandon looked uncomfortable. What do you mean? When you and Stephanie discussed this with Nathan and Rebecca, did you tell them I'd be paying for my own party? We haven't exactly spelled out all the financial details, Brandon admitted, but they understand that family celebrations require everyone to contribute according to their abilities. Victoria felt a surge of anger that surprised her with its intensity. So you let them think this was a generous gift from their siblings, while planning all along to stick me with the bill? It's not like that. It's exactly like that. Victoria stood up again, pacing to the bookshelf where Brandon displayed his sales awards from more successful years. You orchestrated a family conspiracy to manipulate me into funding an event that primarily benefits your business interests, while making everyone else believe you were being generous. Brandon's face reddened. Mom, you're being unfair. We're a family, we should support each other. You've always had more financial resources than the rest of us, and you've never had a problem sharing them before. The words stung because they contained just enough truth to be painful. Victoria had been generous with her family, sometimes perhaps too generous. But there was a crucial difference between choosing to give and being manipulated into paying. Brandon, there's a difference between being asked for help and being set up to be taken advantage of. What you're describing isn't family support. It's financial manipulation wrapped in birthday party decorations. That's not fair, Brandon protested, but his voice lacked conviction. Victoria looked at her eldest son, the boy she'd worked extra hours to put through college, whose house down payment she'd helped fund, whose children's educations she'd been contributing to for years, and felt something shift inside her chest. This wasn't the grateful, loving family member she thought she'd been supporting. This was someone who'd learned to see her as a resource to be managed, rather than a person to be respected. I need to go home and think about this, Victoria said, gathering her purse. I need some time to process what you've just told me. Mom, please don't be angry, Brandon called after her as she headed for the door. We can work this out. Maybe we could scale back the party, find something less expensive. Victoria paused at the office doorway. Brandon, the problem isn't the cost of the party. The problem is that you planned something you couldn't afford and assumed I'd pay for it without bothering to ask me first. That's not how families treat each other. As she walked back through the house, Stephanie appeared from the kitchen, her smile bright but her eyes anxious. Victoria, how did your talk with Brandon go? Are you excited about the party planning? Victoria studied her daughter-in-law's face, seeing the hope and desperation masked beneath the cheerful expression. Stephanie, did you really think I wouldn't figure out that you expect me to pay for my own birthday party? Stephanie's smile faltered. Brandon was supposed to explain everything properly. He did explain, Victoria said quietly. That's exactly the problem. As Victoria drove home through the tree-lined streets of Westfield, past houses where other families were probably having normal conversations about normal birthday celebrations that didn't involve financial manipulation and business networking schemes, she realized that everything she thought she knew about her family dynamics was wrong. And she was going to have to decide what to do about it. Victoria's sleepless night was interrupted at 6:47 a.m. by her phone buzzing insistently on the nightstand. Through bleary eyes, she saw Nathan's name on the caller ID. Her younger son rarely called before noon, let alone before sunrise. Mom? Nathan's voice sounded strained, almost panicked. I just got off the phone with Brandon. He said you might be having second thoughts about the party? Victoria sat up in bed, instantly alert. The speed of this damage control call told her everything she needed to know about how quickly family information traveled when money was involved. Nathan, it's not even 7 in the morning. What's so urgent that it couldn't wait until a reasonable hour? I know, but Mom, I had to call before I lost my nerve. Nathan's words tumbled out in a rush. Brandon told me you found out about the costs, and I want you to know that I never intended for you to feel pressured or manipulated. Victoria noted the careful phrasing. What exactly did Brandon tell you? There was a pause, and she could hear Nathan breathing heavily. He said you were upset about the financial arrangements, but Mom, I need you to understand something. This party isn't just about celebrating you, though that's obviously the most important part. It's also about our family showing that we're still successful, still united. Nathan, are you in financial trouble too? The silence that followed was answer enough. Victoria closed her eyes, feeling a familiar knot form in her stomach. How bad is it? It's not bad exactly, Nathan said, his voice defensive. It's just challenging. The tech startup I was working for went under 6 months ago, and the job market in my field is brutal right now. I've been doing freelance web development, but it's feast or famine, you know? Victoria did know. She'd weathered the early years of building her own business when income was unpredictable, and every month was a financial juggling act. But she'd never expected her children to experience those same struggles without coming to her directly for help. "Why didn't you tell me you'd lost your job?" "Because I didn't want to worry you, and because I thought I'd find something else quickly." Nathan's voice cracked slightly. "But it's been harder than I expected. The rent on my apartment, my student loan payments, basic living expenses. I've been burning through my savings." Victoria felt a surge of maternal concern fighting against her growing anger about the deception. "Nathan, if you needed help, why didn't you just ask me directly? You know I would have supported you." "That's exactly why I couldn't ask," Nathan said miserably. "Mom, you've already done so much for all of us over the years. The college funds, the graduation gifts, helping Brandon and Stephanie with their house, paying for Rebecca's graduate school. I felt like I had already taken enough from you." Victoria's heart ached at the genuine pain in her son's voice, but she couldn't ignore the obvious question. "So instead of asking for direct help, you decided to participate in a scheme to trick me into paying $35,000 for a party I didn't even want?" "It wasn't supposed to be a trick," Nathan protested weakly. "Stephanie said it would be a way for all of us to contribute something meaningful to your celebration, while also creating opportunities for networking and business connections. She made it sound like everyone would benefit. Everyone except me, apparently, since I'm the one expected to pay for it." Nathan was quiet for a moment. "Mom, I know how this looks, but I want you to understand that I genuinely do want to celebrate your birthday. You deserve recognition for everything you've accomplished. But yes, I was also hoping that being part of planning this event might help me make some professional connections. Stephanie said several of your clients would be invited, and maybe I could get some freelance work." Victoria got out of bed and walked to her kitchen, needing coffee to process this conversation. As she started the coffee maker, she realized that Nathan's call wasn't just damage control, it was recruitment. He was trying to convince her to go along with the plan by appealing to her maternal instincts and her desire to help her struggling children. "Nathan, let me ask you something. If I said no to this party, if I told you I wanted a simple family dinner instead, what would happen to your financial situation?" That's not really the point, is it? This is about celebrating you." "Answer the question." Nathan sighed heavily. "I probably have to move back home with you for a while until I can get back on my feet. My lease is up next month and I can't afford to renew it at the current rate." Victoria nearly dropped her coffee mug. "You're facing eviction?" "Not eviction exactly, but I can't afford my rent much longer. I've been hoping something would come through before then, but if this party could lead to some business connections." The manipulation was becoming clearer by the minute. Victoria realized that this birthday party wasn't just about Brandon and Stephanie's networking needs. It was being positioned as a solution to multiple family members' financial problems, all funded by her. "Nathan, who else in the family is having money problems?" "What do you mean? Is Rebecca also struggling financially? Is this party being sold to everyone as some kind of magic solution to the family's economic issues?" Nathan hesitated. "Mom, I think you should probably talk to Rebecca directly about her situation." "That's not an answer. I can't speak for Rebecca, but..." "Look, Mom, the economy has been tough for everyone our age. Student loans, housing costs, job instability. It's not like when you were starting out. Sometimes families need to work together to create opportunities." Victoria felt a surge of anger at the implication that her generation had somehow had it easier. She'd built her business from nothing, working 16-hour days while raising 3 children and managing a household. But more than that, she was angry at being positioned as the family's automatic financial solution, without anyone bothering to respect her enough to be honest about their needs. "Nathan, I'm going to call Rebecca myself. And then I'm going to think very carefully about what kind of family dynamic we've created here. Mom, please don't make any hasty decisions. This party could really help all of us." Victoria hung up without saying goodbye, something she'd never done to one of her children before. But she needed space to think, and Nathan's continued attempts to sell her on the benefits of funding her own celebration were making her feel manipulated rather than loved. She dialed Rebecca's number. unsurprised when it went straight to voicemail. Her youngest daughter had always been the most independent, but also the most likely to avoid difficult conversations. Victoria left a message asking Rebecca to call her back as soon as possible. 20 minutes later, her phone rang. "Mom, Nathan just called me. He said you're upset about the party planning?" Victoria noted that Rebecca sounded guarded rather than concerned. "Rebecca, I need you to tell me honestly, are you also having financial problems?" "Define financial problems." "Don't be cute with me. Are you struggling to pay your bills? Are you hoping this party will somehow solve your money issues?" Rebecca was quiet for a long moment. "Mom, I'm 28 years old with a master's degree in social work. Do you know what social workers make in Boston? I'm barely scraping by, but that's not your responsibility." "That's not what I asked. Are you part of this scheme to get me to pay for my own birthday party?" "It's not a scheme," Rebecca said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Look, when Stephanie first brought up the idea, she presented it as a way for the family to pool resources to do something really special for you. She said you'd probably want to contribute since it was your celebration." "Pool resources? What resources are you contributing to a $35,000 party?" Well, I was going to help with the planning and maybe contribute a few $100s. A few $100s toward a $35,000 event. That's pooling resources? Rebecca's silence told Victoria everything she needed to know. "Rebecca, I want you to think very carefully about your answer to this next question. Did anyone ever intend for this party to be genuinely funded by the family? Or was the plan always to manipulate me into paying for it?" "Mom, that's not fair. We all love you and want to celebrate you." "That's not what I asked." Another long pause. I think Stephanie and Brandon always assumed you'd be willing to pay for most of it. They made it sound like you'd be happy to do it, like it would be your choice." Victoria felt something cold settle in her chest. "But they never actually asked me to make that choice, did they? They just planned an expensive event and assumed I'd go along with it. Mom, please don't be angry with us. We're all struggling right now, and this seemed like it could be a solution that would benefit everyone. You'd get a beautiful celebration, we'd get some networking opportunities, and the family would look successful and united. At my expense. Literally, you can afford it," Rebecca said quietly, and Victoria heard decades of resentment in those 4 words. "You've always been able to afford everything. Sometimes it feels like you forget that the rest of us can't." Victoria sat down hard in her kitchen chair, finally understanding the full scope of what was happening. This wasn't just about a birthday party. This was about years of family dynamics where her success had somehow made her children feel entitled to her resources, while simultaneously resentful of her ability to provide them. "Rebecca, I'm going to say this once, and I want you to listen carefully. If you needed help, you should have asked me directly. If the family wanted to plan a celebration for me, you should have planned something you could actually afford. And if you wanted me to pay for my own party, you should have had the honesty and respect to ask me up front rather than manipulating me into it." "Mom, I'm not finished. What you've all done is create a situation where I'm supposed to be grateful for the privilege of funding my own celebration, while you all benefit from the networking opportunities and the appearance of family success. That's not love, Rebecca. That's exploitation." Victoria hung up and turned off her phone, needing silence to process the magnitude of what she'd discovered. 3 of her children were in financial trouble, none of them had come to her directly for help, and instead they'd conspired to manipulate her into funding a solution that primarily benefited them. As she sat in her kitchen, surrounded by the success she'd built through decades of hard work, Victoria realized that her family's financial problems were about to become much more complicated. Because she was no longer willing to be their automatic solution, and they were about to learn exactly what happened when they mistook her generosity for weakness. Victoria spent the next 3 days in what she privately called business mode, the focused, analytical state of mind that had helped her navigate corporate crises and difficult client situations throughout her career. If her family wanted to treat her like a business transaction, she would respond accordingly. Her first stop was the Westfield Country Club. Mrs. Anderson. The events coordinator, a polished woman named Caroline Phillips, greeted Victoria with the kind of enthusiasm reserved for high-spending clients. How wonderful to see you. I understand your family is planning something very special for your birthday celebration. Victoria smiled pleasantly while studying Caroline's expression for any tells. Yes, I wanted to discuss the details personally. Could you walk me through exactly what my daughter-in-law Stephanie has arranged? Caroline's eyes lit up as she pulled out a thick folder. Oh, it's going to be absolutely magnificent. Mrs. Brandon Anderson has excellent taste. She's selected our platinum package for 150 guests. As Caroline detailed the arrangements, Victoria took careful mental notes. Premium bar service with top-shelf liquor, a 7-course plated dinner featuring organic, locally sourced ingredients, fresh flower arrangements on every table with imported orchids as centerpieces, a 12-piece jazz ensemble for cocktail hour, and a DJ for dancing afterward. Professional photography and videography to capture every moment. The total comes to $38,742, including service charges and taxes, Caroline concluded. Mrs. Brandon Anderson mentioned that payment would be handled directly by the guest of honor, by you, of course. She said it was your preference to manage the financial arrangements personally. Victoria's stomach clenched, but she kept her expression neutral. Did she specify what payment method I preferred? She indicated you'd likely want to put it on a credit card for the rewards points, given the substantial amount. Very savvy business thinking, if you don't mind me saying. So Stephanie had not only planned an event that cost more than Victoria's annual car payment, but had also presumed to explain Victoria's financial preferences to the venue. The audacity was breathtaking. Caroline, I need to ask you something confidentially. In your experience, is it common for family members to plan events of this scale without the person paying for it being directly involved in the planning? Caroline's professional smile flickered slightly. Well, that's unusual. Typically, when someone is investing this much in an event, they want to be quite hands-on with the details. But Mrs. Brandon Anderson explained that you're extremely busy with your business and preferred to delegate the planning while maintaining final approval over expenses. Another lie. Victoria had never expressed any such preference. What happens if I decide to cancel this event? Oh my! Caroline looked genuinely distressed. Well, given that we're only 3 weeks out from your celebration date, there would be substantial cancellation fees. The deposit alone was $8,000, which is non-refundable. Additional cancellation penalties would bring the total to approximately $15,000. Victoria felt her blood pressure spike. When was this deposit paid? Caroline consulted her records. 2 weeks ago. Paid via bank transfer from… Let me see. Anderson Creative Solutions. That's your business account, correct? Victoria managed to nod while her mind raced. Stephanie had somehow gained access to her business banking information and committed her to thousands of dollars in non-refundable expenses without her knowledge or consent. This had moved far beyond family manipulation into potential fraud territory. After leaving the country club, Victoria drove directly to her bank. The conversation with her business banker, James Morrison, confirmed her worst fears. Victoria, I have to say, I was surprised when your daughter-in-law came in with the corporate authorization form, James said, pulling up her account records on his computer. It's unusual for business owners to delegate that level of financial authority to family members who aren't officially employed by the company. James, I never signed any authorization form giving Stephanie access to my business accounts. The banker's expression shifted to one of concern. Victoria, I have your signature right here. Stephanie presented it along with proper identification and explained that you'd asked her to handle some event-related expenses while you were focused on client work. Victoria examined the authorization form, her heart sinking as she recognized what had happened. The signature was indeed hers, lifted from a birthday card she'd signed for one of Brandon and Stephanie's children several months earlier. She remembered Stephanie commenting on how elegant her handwriting was and asking her to sign her name on a separate piece of paper for the kids to practice copying. Victoria had thought it was a sweet request from a proud grandmother-in-law. Instead, it had been evidence gathering. "James, this signature was forged. I need you to reverse that transfer immediately and flag this account for unauthorized access." "Victoria, if you're alleging fraud, we'll need to file a formal report. This could have serious legal implications for your family member." Victoria looked at the bank documents showing how Stephanie had methodically accessed her business account, transferred $8,000 to the country club, and then made additional payments to vendors for flowers, photography, and entertainment services. The total unauthorized spending was approaching $12,000. "File the report," Victoria said quietly, "and freeze all accounts associated with my business until we sort this out." Her next stop was her attorney's office. Richard Chen had handled her business legal needs for over a decade and was one of the few people who knew the full scope of her financial situation. "Victoria, what Stephanie did constitutes both forgery and embezzlement," Richard said after reviewing the banking documents. "The fact that she's family doesn't change the legal reality. She accessed your business funds without authorization and used them for personal purposes. What are my options? You can file criminal charges, pursue civil recovery, or both. Given the amounts involved and the sophistication of the scheme, forging signatures, creating false authorization documents, this is a felony-level offense." Victoria felt sick. "Richard, I don't want to destroy my family, but I also can't let this behavior continue unchecked. There's another issue we need to discuss," Richard continued. "If Stephanie has been this brazen about accessing your financial accounts, you need to conduct a comprehensive audit to ensure there haven't been other unauthorized transactions. Financial elder abuse often escalates over time." The phrase financial elder abuse hit Victoria like a physical blow. At 62, she was hardly frail or incapacitated, but she realized that her family had been treating her exactly like the vulnerable elderly victim she'd read about in news stories, someone whose resources existed primarily for other people's benefit. That evening, Victoria sat in her home office with 5 years' worth of financial statements spread across her desk. Richard had recommended a forensic accountant, but Victoria's own business training was sufficient to spot the patterns once she knew what to look for. The irregularities went back almost 2 years. Small amounts at first, $500 here, $800 there, that could easily be explained as family gifts or emergency assistance. But the pattern was unmistakable. Stephanie had been testing Victoria's attention to her accounts, gradually increasing the amounts and frequency of unauthorized access. The discovery that hurt most wasn't the money itself, but the evidence of planning and coordination. Bank records showed transfers on dates that corresponded with family gatherings, suggesting that Stephanie had been using family events as opportunities to access Victoria's financial information. The Christmas envelope she'd asked Victoria to sign for the kids' thank you notes had apparently yielded a signature that was later used to authorize a $2,000 transfer. A Mother's Day card had provided the handwriting sample for a $1,500 payment to Brandon's credit card company. Victoria's phone rang, interrupting her audit. The caller ID showed Stephanie's number. "Victoria, I've been trying to reach you for days." Stephanie's voice sounded strained. "Brandon said you were upset about the party details, and I wanted to make sure we're all on the same page." Victoria looked at the bank records showing Stephanie's unauthorized access to her accounts. "Stephanie, we need to talk. In person. Can you come over tonight?" "Of course. I'm so glad you want to work this out. I was worried that there had been some kind of misunderstanding." "There's definitely been a misunderstanding," Victoria agreed. "I'll see you in an hour." After hanging up, Victoria continued her financial audit, documenting every unauthorized transaction she could find. By the time Stephanie's car pulled into her driveway, Victoria had assembled evidence of nearly $18,000 in fraudulent activities over the past 18 months. But more than the money, Victoria had discovered something that changed everything. This hadn't been a desperate family's one-time scheme to manipulate her into paying for a party. This had been a systematic, long-term campaign to treat her like a personal ATM, with the birthday party serving as the grand finale to months of financial abuse. As Stephanie knocked on her front door, Victoria realized that the conversation they were about to have wouldn't be about party planning or family misunderstandings. It would be about whether Stephanie preferred to make restitution privately or explain her actions to law enforcement. The woman who had been systematically stealing from her was about to discover that Victoria Anderson hadn't built a successful business by being anyone's victim. And the evidence folder sitting on Victoria's coffee table was about to turn this family drama into something much more serious. Stephanie arrived at Victoria's house carrying a leather portfolio and wearing the kind of bright smile that Victoria now recognized as a warning sign. Her daughter-in-law had dressed carefully for this meeting, a navy blazer that projected competence, subtle jewelry that suggested prosperity, and the confident posture of someone who believed they held the upper hand. "Victoria, you look tired," Stephanie said, settling onto the living room sofa without being invited to sit. "I hope you haven't been worrying about the party details. Everything is completely under control." Victoria remained standing, positioning herself where she could observe Stephanie's facial expressions clearly. Years of reading clients and competitors had taught her that the most important information often came from what people didn't say, and how their bodies betrayed their words. "Stephanie, before we discuss the party, I need to ask you about something else. Have you been accessing my bank accounts?" Stephanie's pause was barely perceptible, but Victoria caught it. The slight tightening around her eyes, the almost imperceptible shift in her posture. "What do you mean?" "I handled the deposit for the country club, but you gave me authorization for that." "When did I give you authorization?" "You signed the banking forms," Stephanie said, her voice carrying just a hint of defensiveness. "You said you trusted me to handle the financial arrangements, since you were so busy with client work." Victoria reached for the evidence folder she'd prepared and placed it on the coffee table between them. "Stephanie, I went to the bank today. I also visited the country club and spoke with my attorney. I know exactly what you've been doing." Stephanie's composure flickered, but she rallied quickly. "Victoria, I think there's been some kind of misunderstanding. Everything I've done has been with your best interests in mind." "Really?" Victoria opened the folder and pulled out the first bank statement. "Can you explain this $2,000 transfer to Brandon's credit card company on December 28th? The one authorized with a signature lifted from a Christmas card?" Stephanie's face went pale, but she maintained her defensive stance. "Brandon was having a temporary cash flow problem. I knew you'd want to help him, and I didn't want to bother you with details during the holidays. So you decided to steal from me instead of asking?" "It's not stealing," Stephanie protested, her voice rising slightly. "We're family. You've always helped us when we needed it. I was just streamlining the process." Victoria pulled out another statement. "What about this $800 transfer on Valentine's Day? And this $1,500 payment in March? And the $500 withdrawal in April? Were those all Brandon's temporary cash flow problems?" Stephanie's carefully constructed facade was beginning to crack. "Victoria, you have to understand our situation. Brandon's income has been unpredictable, my freelance work is inconsistent, and we've been trying to maintain our lifestyle for the kids' sake. You have so much, and we've been struggling just to keep our heads above water. So you decided that gave you the right to forge my signature and steal from my business accounts?" "I never thought of it as stealing," Stephanie said, but her voice lacked conviction. "I thought of it as family assistance that you would have given anyway if you'd known how desperate we were." Victoria felt a surge of anger at the twisted logic. "Stephanie, you've stolen nearly $18,000 from me over the past year and a half. That's not family assistance. That's embezzlement." Stephanie's composure finally collapsed completely. $18,000? No, that's not possible. I've been very careful to keep track. You've been very careful to forge my signatures and create false authorization documents. But you haven't been careful enough to avoid leaving a paper trail." Victoria spread out the complete audit results, watching Stephanie's face as she processed the scope of her own criminal activity. "Every unauthorized transaction is documented here. Every forged signature. Every false banking authorization. My attorney says it's a textbook case of financial elder abuse." "Elder abuse?" Stephanie's voice cracked. "Victoria, you're not elderly. You're one of the most capable, successful people I know." "Which makes your crimes even more calculated," Victoria replied coldly. "You didn't target me because I was vulnerable or confused. You targeted me because you thought I was too trusting and too generous to ever check my own accounts carefully." Stephanie slumped forward, her hands covering her face. "Oh God, Victoria, I never meant for it to go this far. It started with just one emergency payment, And then Brandon lost that big client, and Nathan couldn't find work, and we were all struggling. So you decided to make me struggle instead, by stealing money I earned through my own hard work. You don't struggle, Stephanie said, looking up with tears in her eyes but also a flash of resentment. You have millions of dollars. You live in this beautiful house, you drive luxury cars, you take expensive vacations. Meanwhile, your children are drowning in debt and can barely afford their basic expenses. Victoria felt the familiar sting of being blamed for her own success. But this time it was accompanied by something harder and more determined. Stephanie, my financial situation doesn't give you or anyone else the right to steal from me. If my children needed help, they should have asked me directly and honestly. They were too proud to ask, Stephanie protested. They didn't want to seem like failures. So instead, you made them accessories to your crimes? Stephanie's eyes widened. What do you mean, accessories? Victoria pulled out another document. I mean, where do you think some of that stolen money went? Brandon's credit card payments, cash transfers to Nathan's account, even a payment toward Rebecca's student loans. They all benefited from your fraud, whether they knew it or not. They didn't know, Stephanie said quickly. I never told them where the money came from. I just helped them when they needed it. Using money you stole from their mother. The weight of what she'd done seemed to hit Stephanie all at once. Victoria, please, I know I made terrible mistakes, but we can fix this. I can pay everything back. It might take time, but I swear I'll make it right. With what money? Victoria asked pointedly. You just told me that you and Brandon are barely staying afloat financially. Nathan's facing eviction, and Rebecca's struggling with student loans. Where exactly are you going to find $18,000 to repay what you've stolen? Stephanie's silence was answer enough. Victoria continued, her voice steady but implacable. And that doesn't even address the birthday party situation. You've already spent $12,000 of my money on deposits and payments for an event I never approved. The country club is expecting full payment of over $38,000 in 2 weeks. We can cancel the party, Stephanie said desperately. We'll lose the deposits, but we can stop the rest of the expenses. The deposits you paid with my stolen money? Stephanie flinched as if she'd been slapped. Victoria, I know you're angry, and you have every right to be. But please, think about what pressing charges would do to our family. Brandon could lose his job if this becomes public. Nathan's already struggling to find work. And the kids, what would this do to them? Victoria had been waiting for this moment, the appeal to family loyalty and the well-being of innocent parties. It was the same manipulation tactic Stephanie had been using all along, just dressed up as remorse. Stephanie, you should have thought about the consequences to your family before you started committing crimes. You should have considered the impact on the children before you decided to use family gatherings as opportunities to steal signatures and financial information. I was trying to protect them, Stephanie said, tears streaming down her face. I was trying to keep our family stable and successful looking. I thought if I could just manage things quietly, help everyone through their rough patches, everything would work out. By making me the unwitting financier of everyone else's problems? Stephanie had no answer for that. Victoria stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the quiet street where she'd built her life and her business. Stephanie, I need you to understand something. What you've done isn't just theft, it's a betrayal of everything I thought our family relationship meant. You've made me question every gift I've ever given, every gesture of generosity I've ever made. Victoria, please. I'm not finished. Victoria turned back to face her daughter-in-law. You've also put me in an impossible position. If I don't press charges, I'm essentially telling you, and the rest of the family that stealing from me is acceptable, as long as you feel desperate enough. But if I do press charges, I destroy relationships with people I love. Stephanie looked up hopefully. So you're not going to press charges? Victoria's expression remained hard. I didn't say that. I said you've put me in an impossible position. But here's what I've decided. You have exactly 24 hours to tell Brandon, Nathan, and Rebecca the truth about what you've done, all of it. The forged signatures, the stolen money, the fraudulent banking authorizations, everything. Victoria, I can't. You can, and you will. Because if you don't tell them, I will. And if I have to be the one to reveal your crimes to your own husband and his siblings, I guarantee you won't like how that conversation goes. Stephanie stared at Victoria with a mixture of fear and desperate hope. And if I tell them? What happens then? Victoria's smile was cold and calculating. Then we'll see how much family loyalty really means when the bill comes due. Victoria's phone started ringing at 7:23 a.m., exactly 18 hours after her ultimatum to Stephanie. The caller ID showed Brandon's number, and she could hear the panic in his voice before he even spoke. Mom, what the hell is going on? Stephanie told me some insane story about bank fraud and stolen signatures. Please tell me she's having some kind of breakdown, and none of this is real. Victoria had been awake since 5 a.m., preparing for this moment. She'd spent the early morning hours organizing evidence files for each of her children, documenting not just Stephanie's crimes, but also tracking which family members had unknowingly benefited from the stolen funds. Brandon, I think you need to come over, bring Stephanie with you, and call Nathan and Rebecca. They need to hear this too. Mom, just tell me, is it true? Has Stephanie really been stealing from you? Victoria looked at the evidence spread across her dining room table like a prosecutor preparing for trial. Yes, Brandon, it's true, and it's much worse than whatever version she told you. The silence on the other end of the line stretched so long that Victoria wondered if the call had been dropped. When Brandon finally spoke, his voice was hollow. How much? We'll discuss everything when you get here, 1 hour. After hanging up, Victoria received a frantic text from Nathan. Mom, Brandon just called. Please tell me this is all a misunderstanding. 20 minutes later, Rebecca called from Boston, her voice tight with anxiety. Mom, I'm driving down right now. Whatever's happening, I need to hear it directly from you. By 9 a.m., Victoria's living room had transformed into an impromptu courtroom. Brandon sat rigid in the corner armchair, his face a mask of controlled fury. Stephanie occupied the far end of the sofa, her eyes red from crying and her hands trembling slightly. Nathan paced near the window, his nervous energy filling the room with tension. Rebecca had driven through the night from Boston and looked exhausted but alert. Victoria stood at the head of the room, a folder in her hands that contained the financial evidence that would reshape her family's understanding of the past 18 months. Before I begin, Victoria said, her voice carrying the authority she'd developed in boardrooms full of skeptical executives. I want everyone to understand that what I'm about to share with you are documented facts, not accusations or misunderstandings. These are bank records, forged documents, and unauthorized transactions that my attorney has already reviewed. Brandon's jaw tightened. Mom, just cut to the chase. What exactly did Stephanie do? Victoria opened the folder and pulled out a chronological summary she'd prepared. Over the past 18 months, Stephanie has systematically accessed my business bank accounts without authorization, using forged signatures to steal nearly $20,000. Nathan stopped pacing abruptly. $20,000? The thefts began small, Victoria continued, consulting her notes. 500 here, 800 there. Stephanie would use family gatherings to collect signature samples from birthday cards, thank you notes, and other innocent documents I signed. She then used those signatures to create false banking authorization forms. Rebecca leaned forward, her face pale. Mom, are you absolutely certain about this? Victoria handed her daughter a stack of bank statements with highlighted transactions. Each of these represents an unauthorized withdrawal from my accounts. The corresponding forged authorizations are in the folder marked Evidence B. As Rebecca reviewed the documents, her expression shifted from disbelief to horror. Stephanie, how could you do this? Stephanie finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. I never meant to hurt anyone. Everything I did was to help this family. Help yourself, you mean? Brandon said, his voice cold with fury. Jesus Christ, Stephanie, you've been stealing from my mother for over a year? I was helping you too, Stephanie protested, turning to face her husband. Where do you think the money came from when I paid off your credit card debt in December? Or when I covered Nathan's rent payment in March? Or when I sent money to Rebecca for her student loan payment?" The room went silent as the implications sank in. Victoria watched her children's faces as they realized they had all unknowingly benefited from Stephanie's theft. Nathan sat down heavily in the nearest chair. "The money you sent me for rent? That was stolen from Mom?" "I didn't tell you where it came from because I knew you'd refuse it," Stephanie said desperately. "You were about to be evicted, and I couldn't let that happen to family." Rebecca looked sick. "The student loan payment. Stephanie, I thanked you for months for that help. I thought you and Brandon were just being generous." "We were being generous," Stephanie insisted. "Just with money that rightfully belonged to all of us anyway." The statement hung in the air like a bomb that hadn't quite exploded yet. Victoria felt her anger crystallize into something cold and sharp. "Money that rightfully belonged to all of you?" Victoria repeated slowly. "Stephanie, that money belonged to me. I earned it through my business. It wasn't some family inheritance that you had a claim to." "You have millions," Stephanie shot back, her desperation making her reckless. "You live in luxury while your children struggle with basic expenses. Was it really so wrong to help them when you have so much?" Brandon stood up abruptly. "Stop talking, Stephanie, right now. Just stop." "No, I won't stop," Stephanie continued, her voice rising. "Everyone in this room has benefited from Victoria's success over the years. But somehow, when I try to help during a crisis, I'm the criminal." Victoria felt something snap inside her chest. "Stephanie, there's a crucial difference between choosing to give gifts to people I love and having money stolen from me by someone who thinks my success makes me everyone else's automatic financial solution." "The birthday party?" Nathan said suddenly, his face ashen. "Oh God, Mom, the birthday party was part of this too, wasn't it?" Victoria nodded grimly. "Stephanie has already spent $12,000 of my stolen money on party deposits and vendor payments. She planned a $38,000 celebration that she expected me to pay for, while presenting it to all of you as a generous gift from the family." Rebecca buried her face in her hands. "I feel sick. I actually thanked her for organizing such a beautiful celebration for you. Because that's what she wanted you to think," Victoria said. "She wanted all of you to believe she was being generous and thoughtful, while actually setting up an elaborate scheme to manipulate me into funding my own party and providing networking opportunities for everyone else's benefit." Brandon turned to face his wife, his expression a mixture of rage and disgust. "Stephanie, you've been lying to everyone. To me, to my siblings, to my mother. You've made us all accessories to your theft." "I was trying to hold this family together," Stephanie pleaded. "Everyone was struggling, and Victoria had the resources to help, but none of you were willing to ask for what you needed. So you decided to steal it instead?" Nathan's voice cracked with emotion. "Stephanie, I would rather have been homeless than find out I was living on money stolen from my own mother." Victoria watched her youngest son's face crumple with shame, and realized that Stephanie's crimes had wounded more than just her bank account. Her children were now questioning every bit of help they'd received, wondering what was legitimate generosity and what was the product of theft. "There's something else you all need to understand," Victoria said quietly. "This isn't just about money. Stephanie's actions have made me question every family interaction we've had over the past year. Every time she complimented my handwriting, every time she asked me to sign something for the kids, every family gathering where she had access to my personal belongings, it was all potentially part of gathering evidence for her fraud." Rebecca looked up with tears in her eyes. "Mom, I am so sorry. If I had known—" "You couldn't have known," Victoria interrupted gently. "Stephanie was very careful to make sure none of you knew where the money was really coming from." Brandon walked over to the window, his shoulders rigid with tension. "What happens now, Mom? Are you pressing charges?" Victoria had been preparing for this question. "That depends on what happens next. Stephanie has committed multiple felonies: financial fraud, forgery, embezzlement. My attorney says it's a textbook case that any prosecutor would love to pursue." Stephanie started crying again. "Victoria, please, think about what this would do to the children, to Brandon's career, to our whole family." "I am thinking about the family," Victoria replied coldly. "I'm thinking about what kind of family dynamic we've created, where one person feels entitled to steal from another and then blame the victim for having money worth stealing. Nathan stood up and walked over to his mother. "Mom, whatever you decide to do, I want you to know that I'll support it completely. What Stephanie did was unforgivable." Rebecca nodded tearfully. "Me too, Mom. I can't believe I accepted money that was stolen from you." Brandon turned back from the window, his face hard. "Stephanie, pack your bags. You're leaving. Today." "Brandon, please. No, I can't even look at you right now. You've destroyed our marriage, our relationship with my family, and made our children part of your criminal conspiracy. Get out." Victoria watched her family implode and realized that regardless of what legal action she chose to take, Stephanie's betrayal had already changed everything irreversibly. The question now was whether anything could be salvaged from the wreckage, and what price her family would ultimately pay for one woman's sense of entitlement. 2 days after the family meeting, Victoria sat in her office reviewing a proposal that would have seemed impossible a week earlier. Her business instincts, sharpened by decades of competitive marketing campaigns, had identified an opportunity that would serve multiple purposes: recover her stolen money, deliver consequences proportional to the betrayal, and send a message that would prevent future exploitation. The key had come during a conversation with her attorney, Richard Chen, when he mentioned the civil remedies available beyond criminal prosecution. "Victoria, given the systematic nature of the fraud and the business account involvement, you could pursue treble damages under Connecticut's Unfair Trade Practices Act," Richard had explained, "plus recovery of legal fees, investigation costs, and punitive damages for the emotional distress." But Victoria's plan went far beyond legal remedies. She had spent 40 years building relationships in Connecticut's business community, and those relationships were about to become weapons. Her first call was to Marcus Webb, the president of the Westfield Chamber of Commerce, and one of her longest-standing professional connections. "Victoria, I heard through the grapevine that there might be some family troubles," Marcus said when she reached him. "I hope everything's all right." Victoria had carefully crafted her approach. "Marcus, I'm calling because I need to address a situation that could affect several local businesses. My daughter-in-law has been conducting fraudulent financial activities using my business accounts, and some of those transactions involved local vendors." "My God, Victoria. Are you talking about embezzlement?" "I'm talking about systematic fraud that includes forged bank authorizations, unauthorized use of business funds, and what appears to be an elaborate scheme to defraud multiple local service providers." Victoria let the implications sink in. The country club, several catering companies, photographers, florists, they're all involved as unknowing recipients of fraudulent payments. Marcus was quiet for a moment. "What kind of amounts are we discussing?" "Nearly $40,000 in fraudulent transactions, with more planned." "Marcus, I wanted to give you a heads up because this is going to become public knowledge very soon, and it involves businesses that are chamber members." "Victoria, what do you need from me?" "I need the business community to understand that when someone commits fraud against Anderson Creative Solutions, there are consequences that extend beyond just family embarrassment." Her next call was to Jennifer Walsh, the social editor of the Westfield Gazette, who covered all the high society events and charity functions that formed the backbone of the local social scene. "Jennifer, I have a story that I think your readers need to know about," Victoria began. "It involves fraud, forgery, and the exploitation of elderly business owners by their own family members." "Victoria, are you talking about yourself?" "I'm talking about a pattern of financial abuse that could affect any successful business person in our community. Someone close to them gains access to their accounts, forges their signatures, and systematically steals money while presenting themselves as helpful family members." Victoria had prepared talking points that positioned her story as a cautionary tale rather than just personal drama. "Jennifer, I think it's important for our community to understand how sophisticated these schemes can be, and how even experienced business owners can become victims when they trust the wrong people." By the end of the week, Victoria had made strategic calls to 12 key figures in Westfield's business and social circles. She never mentioned Stephanie by name, never violated any legal boundaries, but she ensured that the story of a local family's fraud scheme was spreading through the community's most influential networks. The social consequences began immediately. Stephanie's freelance graphic design business depended heavily on referrals from other parents at the private school her children attended. When word spread that she was involved in a fraud investigation, those referrals dried up instantly. Brandon's pharmaceutical sales territory included several of the same business owners Victoria had contacted. His clients began asking uncomfortable questions about his family situation and whether his personal problems might affect his professional reliability. But Victoria's most devastating move was yet to come. She had spent considerable time researching Stephanie's professional background and discovered that her daughter-in-law had been presenting herself as a successful entrepreneur to potential clients. Stephanie's website and marketing materials prominently featured her family's upscale lifestyle as evidence of her business acumen. Victoria's counterattack was surgical in its precision. She contacted the Better Business Bureau with documentation of Stephanie's fraudulent activities, filed complaints with the professional organizations that Stephanie claimed membership in, and provided evidence to the state licensing board that Stephanie had been operating her business using fraudulently obtained funds. The bureaucratic consequences cascaded quickly. Stephanie's business license was suspended pending investigation. Her memberships in professional organizations were revoked. Most critically, the investigation triggered automatic background checks that would follow her for years. Victoria's phone rang on Friday afternoon. It was Brandon, and his voice carried a mixture of exhaustion and desperate anger. "Mom, you need to stop this. Stephanie's business is destroyed. I'm getting questions from my manager about my family situation, and the kids are hearing rumors at school. This has gone too far." Victoria set down her coffee and prepared for the conversation she'd been anticipating. "Brandon, I haven't done anything to Stephanie. I've simply made sure that the business community is aware of the fraud that was committed against my company. You're destroying her professionally. She'll never be able to work in this area again." "Brandon, Stephanie destroyed herself professionally when she decided to build her business using money stolen from me. I'm simply ensuring that potential clients have access to accurate information about her character and business practices. But what about the kids? They don't deserve to suffer for their mother's mistakes." Victoria felt the familiar stab of pain that came with discussions about her grandchildren, but she'd prepared for this emotional manipulation. "Brandon, Stephanie should have considered the impact on her children before she started committing crimes. I can't protect them from the consequences of their mother's choices. Mom, please. If you press criminal charges on top of everything else, it will destroy what's left of our family. Our family was destroyed the moment Stephanie decided to treat me like a victim instead of a family member," Victoria replied coldly. "What you're seeing now isn't me destroying anything. It's the natural consequences of criminal behavior. There has to be some way to make this right," Brandon pleaded. "Some way to move forward as a family." Victoria had been waiting for this moment, when Brandon would finally ask the question that mattered. "Brandon, there is a way forward, but it requires acknowledgement of what actually happened and genuine accountability from everyone involved." "What do you mean?" "I mean that Stephanie needs to face the full legal consequences of her crimes. Criminal charges, restitution, and a permanent record that will prevent her from victimizing anyone else. And everyone in the family needs to understand that my generosity is a gift, not an entitlement." Brandon was quiet for a long moment. "And if we agree to that? If Stephanie pleads guilty and makes full restitution?" Victoria smiled, though Brandon couldn't see it. "Then we discuss what kind of relationship is possible going forward. But Brandon, understand this clearly. The old dynamic where my success made me everyone's automatic financial solution is over permanently." After hanging up, Victoria turned to her computer and began drafting an email to the event coordinator at the Westfield Country Club. She was going to host a birthday celebration after all, but it would be entirely on her terms. The guest list would include all the business associates and community leaders she'd been building relationships with for decades. The event would celebrate not just her birthday, but her success in protecting herself and other potential victims from financial exploitation. And the cost would be paid entirely by funds she chose to spend, not money stolen from her accounts. Victoria Anderson was about to throw herself the birthday party she actually wanted, one that demonstrated exactly what happened to people who mistook her kindness for weakness. The social and professional destruction of her daughter-in-law was just the beginning of showing her family and community what real consequences looked like. 6 weeks after the family reckoning, Victoria stood in the same Westfield Country Club ballroom, where Stephanie had planned to manipulate her into funding her own celebration. But tonight's event bore no resemblance to the networking scheme her daughter-in-law had orchestrated. Tonight was a genuine celebration of triumph over betrayal, paid for entirely with Victoria's own chosen funds and attended by people who respected rather than exploited her success. The guest list included Connecticut's most influential business leaders, her marketing agency's biggest clients, and the professional contacts she'd spent decades cultivating. Notably absent were Brandon, Nathan, and Rebecca, absence that spoke volumes about the new boundaries Victoria had established. Marcus Webb, the Chamber of Commerce president, raised his glass as the evening reached its peak. Ladies and gentlemen, we're here tonight not just to celebrate Victoria Anderson's 65th birthday, but to honor someone who showed our entire business community what it means to stand up to exploitation and protect yourself without compromising your dignity. The applause was genuine and sustained. Victoria looked around the elegantly decorated room, paid for with her own money, planned according to her own preferences, attended by people who valued her contributions rather than her bank account, and felt a satisfaction that had nothing to do with revenge and everything to do with self-respect restored. Her phone vibrated with a text message. It was from Rebecca. "Mom, I saw the pictures from your party in the Gazette. You look beautiful and happy. I hope someday we can talk." Victoria read the message twice before deleting it without responding. Some bridges, once burned, stayed burned. The criminal case against Stephanie had concluded the week before, with a plea agreement that surprised no one who understood the strength of Victoria's evidence. Stephanie pleaded guilty to multiple counts of fraud and embezzlement, receiving 2 years of probation, 500 hours of community service, and an order to pay full restitution plus penalties, a total of $47,000. But the real punishment wasn't the legal consequences. It was the complete destruction of Stephanie's ability to function in Westfield's interconnected business and social community. Her graphic design business was permanently finished, her professional reputation destroyed beyond repair, and her social connections severed. Brandon had been forced to transfer to a different sales territory to escape the professional stigma, effectively exiling the family from the community where they'd tried to build their fraudulent success. Victoria's attorney had presented her with the final restitution check that morning, $47,000, representing not just the stolen money, but acknowledgement that actions have consequences even within families. "Victoria," Richard Chen had said as he handed her the check, "I've been practicing law for 25 years, and I've never seen someone handle a family fraud case with such strategic precision. You didn't just recover your money. You created a deterrent effect that will protect other potential victims." As the evening wound down, Victoria found herself in conversation with Detective Sarah Martinez, who had investigated Stephanie's crimes and become fascinated by the case's unique dynamics. "Mrs. Anderson, can I ask you something?" Detective Martinez said. "Do you ever regret how far you took this? I mean, your daughter-in-law is essentially unemployable in this area now." Victoria considered the question while watching her guests, successful, respected business people who had built their achievements through legitimate hard work. "Detective Stephanie made a calculation that I was too trusting and too generous to protect myself effectively. She bet that family loyalty would prevent me from pursuing consequences for her crimes. And you proved her wrong. I proved that kindness and accountability aren't mutually exclusive. Stephanie didn't just steal money from me, she tried to steal my agency, my dignity, and my right to make my own choices about my resources." Detective Martinez nodded. "What about your children? I understand they're not speaking to you." Victoria felt the familiar ache that came with that reality, but her voice remained steady. "My children made their choice when they had to decide between supporting justice and protecting someone who had victimized their mother. I hope they'll eventually understand that I couldn't enable that behavior without losing myself in the process. Do you think they'll come around?" Victoria looked out at the country club's perfectly manicured grounds, where other families were probably having normal relationships built on mutual respect rather than financial exploitation. "I don't know. But I know that I can't build relationships on the foundation of being someone's automatic financial solution. If they want a relationship with me, it will have to be because they value me as a person, not as a resource." As Victoria prepared to leave her birthday celebration, she received an unexpected visitor. Tommy Chen, Richard's son, and a recent law school graduate approached her table. "Mrs. Anderson, I hope you don't mind the interruption, but I wanted to thank you personally." Victoria looked puzzled. "Thank me for what, Tommy?" "My dad's been using your case as a teaching example in the elder law seminars he's been conducting. The way you documented everything, protected yourself legally, and refused to be victimized, it's become a model for how people should handle family financial abuse." Victoria smiled. "I'm glad something positive came from such an ugly situation." "More than you know," Tommy continued. "We've had 3 other cases this month where family members tried similar schemes, but the victims knew to contact us immediately because they'd heard about your case. You've probably prevented thousands of dollars in fraud just by showing people that they don't have to accept being victimized by family." As Victoria drove home to the elegant townhouse she'd purchased after selling her family home, too many painful memories in those rooms where Stephanie had systematically planned her crimes, she reflected on the transformation of the past 2 months. Her business was thriving, boosted by the respect she'd earned for handling her personal crisis with such professional competence. Her social connections had deepened as people admired her refusal to be victimized. Most importantly, she'd reclaimed her right to make decisions about her own life and resources. The cost had been enormous. Her relationship with her children remained fractured, possibly permanently. She would likely never see her grandchildren grow up. The family she'd worked so hard to support and unite had essentially ceased to exist. But as Victoria unlocked the door to her new home, a space that was entirely hers, protected by security systems and legal safeguards that would prevent anyone from ever accessing her resources without permission again, she realized that some prices were worth paying. On her kitchen counter sat a stack of thank you notes from the evening's guests, but one stood out. It was from Jennifer Walsh, the newspaper editor, who had helped spread awareness of Stephanie's fraud. "Victoria," the note read, "tonight's celebration was beautiful, but more than that, it was inspiring. You showed all of us what dignity looks like when it's defended rather than surrendered. Thank you for the reminder that we teach people how to treat us, and sometimes the most loving thing we can do is refuse to enable destructive behavior." Victoria smiled and placed the note on her refrigerator, next to a photo from the evening showing her surrounded by people who respected her success rather than resenting it, who celebrated her achievements rather than scheming to exploit them. Her phone rang one final time that night. The caller ID showed Nathan's number, but Victoria let it go to voicemail. Some conversations could wait until she was ready to have them on her terms, if ever. As she prepared for bed in her new home, Victoria Anderson realized that she'd finally learned the difference between being generous and being a victim. The birthday party she'd thrown herself had cost exactly what she'd chosen to spend, celebrated exactly what she'd wanted to celebrate, and included exactly the people who valued her for exactly the right reasons. It had taken 65 years and a devastating family betrayal, but Victoria had finally learned to give herself the gift that mattered most, the absolute certainty that she would never again mistake kindness for weakness, or allow love to be used as a weapon against her. The woman who had once worried about being too generous had discovered something far more valuable than money, the unshakable knowledge that she was nobody's victim, and that sometimes the most powerful act of love is teaching people that there are consequences for treating you badly. As she turned off the lights in her secure, beautiful, entirely her own home, Victoria Anderson smiled. Tomorrow would bring new opportunities, new choices, and new chances to be generous, but only with people who had earned the privilege of her trust. The party was over, but the celebration of her independence had just begun. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.